Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. And if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. I am so comfortable tonight. What a nice evening to be sitting here in the dark. It was in the dark. I've got the lights on now, but lightning and thunder and it cooling off a little bit. It's all the way down to 21 Celsius when this afternoon it had already made it all the way up to 30. It's cooling off now. My air conditioner's getting a little bit of a break, and that fan behind me is just lovely. We can grumble and complain about how bad the world is, right? It's the worst times ever. And these small luxuries, right? And sometimes they do make life bearable, right? I appreciate the chill, even in my bedding, in the middle of winter I don't have the heat on. I really like the cold weather. I appreciate my evening walks at minus 40, minus 50 Celsius more than I appreciate my walks when it's like plus 30, plus 40. And it gets pretty hot. We swing in the extremes here in Manitoba. And hi, if you've never met me before, I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I am so grateful for an opportunity to be a steward. For the most part of my life, I have been a taker in this role that I play in what I contribute or don't contribute in my, what is it, room and board. We'll call it. Yes, that's exactly what it is, because you know as a community, and when I say community, we're talking about the whole world in genuine, in general, not in all those gazillion little groups that make up the world. We find people who really, really, really care, that really are the stewards. I only woke up recently to the gifts that this world offers us. And whether it's my fan, the air conditioner, whether it's the lightning and the thunder, that's a gift too, because it's something that I enjoy, right? It's something I enjoy. I know lots of people don't appreciate the thunder and lightning. I know lots of people who don't. And you would think them big, strong masculines or alpha women, and yet, the first sound of clap of thunder or a sheet of lightning streaking across the sky, and they cower into the little ones that they really are, right? It's the toughness that's the fake part of us, because that's kind of saying don't mess with me, right? Right, but in all honesty, it's just a bunch of gas. And I learned that one very young in my childhood, in sticking up for myself and the bullies. And you know, we learn through our own experiences. And, when we talk about the group of the world, and then we talk about all those little groups that make the group of the world, right? Whether they're groups in religion, the Christians, the Muslims, the Jehovah Witness, the Scientologists, the spiritualists. Like, there are so many, right? And going to the cultural groups, where you got the Amish and the Hutterites, and you got the Tibetans, and each culture has different traditions and what are they, rituals that separate themselves from other groups in the world. And I think, in this digital age, we have a real opportunity to get closer and closer. Those children of the 80s who grew up during the 80s, they really did so much work without even recognizing it, because by then schools were so multicultural and we were so aware of racism or right, the etiquette of it not being in existence. And to some extent it still was. To some extent, some of these are practices in our relationships with people who are different than us, but it's in the practicing that we can settle in or give ourselves an opportunity to get to know people. And these things eventually dissipate, because they are misunderstandings that we brought on as truths. And it's only in that experience that we get to recognize where we get things right and where we get things wrong. So going back to the small groups, I think, as the world moves forward, at least for the next little while, some of those groups are going to get very, very small, possibly even singular. You know, even for myself, I feel that need to pull myself away. And I was talking to one of the ladies outside, and they had put a little cherry tree out in the garden in memorial for somebody who passed away in the building. And I said, did the management, donate that, or did the money come from the estate, or did you take a little collection? She goes, oh yeah, we took a collection. Everybody pitched in. I said, well, I didn't pitch in. I didn't know anything about it. She goes, oh, but you don't hang out downstairs with us in the evenings, and I thought about that, and it is true. I'm very um singular. I'm singular that way because it's in those lessons that my groups are very naturally small, number one. And number two, I am by nature that person who can save energy by not being so hyper focused on my safety. And when you're out in those situations, it's not like I never did. I've been to many, many house parties and concerts and stuff, right? I I get it. But, for myself, I would prefer a little bit of solitude in that, because then my focus and my hypervigilance could relax a little bit because I'm not looking for the boogeyman. I'm not looking for the murderers and rapers. And, unfortunately, being highly sensitive, being empathic, that we do believe because we've seen from our own experiences the tendencies for people to sway on those lines, whether they're good or bad. And I just kind of float in the middle. I have always floated in the moment. If I'm swinging with people on this side at one moment, that's the way I'm swinging. And if I'm swinging on this side with these people, then I'm swinging on this side. Quite often, they're both there, and I have no choice but to target myself in my own uniqueness by being in the middle, right? Just in that hypervigilance for keeping my own safety, you know. And when I said that, what came to my mind is that idea of these monkeys, in Africa, and every once in a while they crossbreed with another species of monkeys, and like the liger and the donkeys and stuff. Every once in a while, you can have offspring, from those different species. I have a cat who is who's a tortoise shell, and that is a cross between a black cat and a white cat. And the male cats don't usually get born, they're usually always female cats. But if the male cats are born, they're usually infertile that way. Okay, so before I go so far down, I go down these side branches and I'm just talking about something else, you know? So in the small groups, I do feel safer because I don't have to put a great amount of attention on what's going on around me, just like in my apartment. This is my safe space. I don't even have kids, a husband, nothing. It's just me and my cat, right? And it's comfortable and it feels safe. And to some people, you might say, well, that's your own jail and that's your own trap that you're just kind of right. You're building around yourself, and I have to disagree with that because a lot of what I'm doing now is literally saving my soul, moving me forward, opening my eyes up to understandings that I might never have understood if not for the experiences that I've had. And so, you know, I really have to appreciate, however the lessons come to me. I do baby steps, right? And even at my age, when I feel that breath on the back of my neck, I feel that it's not time's running out, but time is catching up, right? But I'm still not going to rush in that because I want to do a good job for myself, for those parts of me that'll be moving forward, for my nieces and nephews and their children and generations going down the road, that we don't find ourselves in that situation again, right? That each generation could do a little bit better than the generation before. And sometimes that means to, right, have those smaller groups in the beginning because it's right. You know what's in store. You know what being in the middle, that agitation, that could drum up, right? But again, is that my own jail? Is that a trap that I'm building for myself so that I don't get out there and feel my way along and find people who also live in the middle? And when I say in the middle, it's that understanding that, that they are human, that they are a human soul, and that in that assimilation and amalgamation, right, that we have to be the stewards of ourselves, but we still don't want to be doing that. We are social creatures, right? We were brought into the world to have an experience, or at the very least, we were brought into the world so we have the right to have an experience, the best experience that we can create for ourselves, right? Some of us get it right, some of us get it wrong, some of us get it right by getting it wrong, right? and that's and that's a truth too. So in understanding that and making my groups, it's not going to be groups, it's not going to be networks, right? Of course, I believe, you know, in the understandings of people who move together, right? But it doesn't always mean that they're all on the same page. They're all just kind of walking down the path together for a little while, right? So I have to feel my own way, understanding that I'm in the middle, but I'm not the only one in the middle, right? I'm not the only human soul out there, and that's pretty amazing, right? In this moment it might be a small group, but there was a moment when it wasn't a possibility. It was, right? It was a choice between two sides, and there was no happy medium. There was no opportunity for resolution, and there was no chance of making peace with ourselves or anybody else. And yet, right, there are people out there trying, right, being the stewards of the world in those small, small things that we can do. And that's how it starts out, just the small things, things that don't cost money, things that only take our time, that take our attention, that take our care, right? And in the beginning, that's how it works. And if that's all you've got to give, that's amazing. That's how I came in, right? I'm still there, by the way, in that little drummer girl idea, right? That everybody has a gift. Everybody has something to offer. And we all look for the beauty, we look for the power, we look for the money, right? But how often do we look for the happiness, the good health, right? So grateful for my good health because I couldn't imagine doing what I'm doing right now and being that examples to others when, you know, I truly am hurting, right? And whether that's emotionally, physically, or mentally, because we all have those handicaps. It's not like I'm not hurting, right? But we all hurt a different way. And the fact that I don't hurt in a an actual physical way, that's pretty amazing, right? Because that's not the norm for my family in the past. But going forward, right? What you think about is realized. But if you think about it and you need it realized, you have to move towards it, right? Meet in the middle. Two heads are better than one, right? Uh, takes all kinds to make the world, right? And yeah, it works out. It really does work out. It really is quite amazing that that we can get ourselves in these what we think is desperate situations, and maybe they are desperate situations. They seem like it sometimes, but not dwelling on it and using a few lessons along the way to alleviate some of that discomfort. It makes it more bearable so that maybe you could just inch forward a little bit more, just enough sometimes, just to see the clearing. Sometimes that's all we need, is to be able to see the clearing, the light at the end of the tunnel, the finish line, right? Okay, you guys, that's my good chair. Oh, by the way, I did spend about 2.5 hours catching up on my podcast, so I'll be sure. Maybe I'll do it right now, come into my live, take in the lesson. If not, I won't let them stack up like that again, because there really was some good insights for me. So much so, I gave myself my own thumbs up on that, which I don't normally do. But you know what? I was really afraid in my imposter syndrome that I was just making a fool of myself, that I didn't make sense, that I had just kind of crossed the line. And you know what? All I did was cross the barrier. You guys, have a great night. We'll see you Monday. If you want to pop in Sunday night for Chatters Live, I have an amazing crew over there. We have a really good time. I will be there 7:30 Central, give or take 5 minutes. But if not, like I said, have a great weekend, and we'll see you.